Hello, everybody, and welcome to this, our very first Lookout Sir of 2025. What an exciting time, Phil, to be here this far into the history of the planet. Do you feel thrilled and or excited to be ever so slightly closer towards your inevitable demise, but also, you know, the theme and or setting of the Warhammer 40,000 universe? Only another, what would that be? Many thousand years to go, Phil, and you could be living that dream.
I too could be a brain in a jar ruling the known universe. Wouldn't that be fun?
It would certainly be something. I mean, whether or not that is really what you want to be doing with yourself is obviously, you know, a question that only you may be able to discover the answer to. But yeah, man, 2025, an exciting time to be alive. We are living, Phil, it seems, in the future. Dystopian or otherwise, the future is where it's at, baby. But where are our jetpacks? That's what I say, eh?
No, I've been wanting them for years. I mean, it does seem like there are actually some jetpacks, and
yeah, there are a few.
There's those slightly naff water ones as well, but I don't really, you know, I can't see the Emperor's finest using the water jetpacks when they're, you know, assaulting the Necron lines with their chainswords.
Certainly not in the irradiated wasteland that the world of Warhammer 40,000 paints terror to become in the future. I don't think there's too much in the way of an ocean in the 40k version of Earth, right?
No, there could be a sand version of a jetpack.
Oh, there you go. Some kind of elaborate event in that regard. I suppose it would have to kind of, yeah. I imagine that's within the realms of possibility. Good work, Phil. There you go. And then maybe for a heating process, it could spit out like glass at the other side, so it could double up as a really elaborate, you know, projectile weapon, as well as also a form of trajectory. You know what I mean? Movement.
Yeah, projection.
There's projection. Yeah. There we go. Yeah. There we go. Good. Wonderful. Well, look, everyone, first of all, you know, this isn't going to be our typical Lookout Sir episode, mostly because life is a complicated mess of a thing, and I've been dealing with a lot of personal dilemmas. So this is just me and Phil, you know, having a chat about, you know, where we are with, you know, the hobby in the general sense, as well as obviously 2025 through the perspective of Lookout Sir. So it's going to be more of a chatty, general convo. You know, we will have stuck an intro before this, because, you know, tradition dictates, but whether or not we actually find the time to do an outro or not between now Wednesday and it being released on Saturday is anyone's guess. I mean, Phil's busy tomorrow night, so, I mean...
No, I'm busy the day after tomorrow, Dan.
Are you? Are you busy Friday night?
I'm busy Friday, not Thursday.
Oh, fine. Yeah. Well, then, in which case, we'll probably have an outro after this, although Lord knows what that'll be. It'll just be more of this, I suppose. But that'll be exclusively in an audio format, only available on the full podcast, which is available on Spotify and YouTube as well, to be fair, just without video in it for some reason, because we like to segment this. But yeah, Phil, 2025, an exciting new opportunity for hobby, an exciting new opportunity for Lookout Sir. Every, you know, day is a new chance for something different, I suppose. But yeah, it's a really... you know, interesting time ahead of us in 2025. I mean, there's going to be quite a lot of codexes. I speculated at one point there should be as many as 13 codexes that need to come out. I can't remember what all of them are now, or even if that number's accurate. But we know for certain, in the immediate sense, that we're going to get the Guard Codex. That's coming down the pipe. They've announced that the big pre-order box of that is going on pre-order this Saturday. So that's exciting. Will you be getting one, Phil?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it was briefly tempting, but ultimately I think I'd rather just get the codex. And from that, if I need any of the new stuff, I'll then go off and buy the new stuff when I need it. But I don't need a bunch of plastic Death Riders, so I think it's a pass for me.
You have the superior resin ones, you Warhammer hipster, you.
Yeah, and if I wanted to challenge myself, I think it could be a fun project to try and convert some of the original ones into the new poses, using the poses as a guide. If I had the time and inclination to do that, which currently I don't, but in the little back of my noggin, that idea is stowing away.
Give them bigger claw hands, you know, rather than those little weird little, like, geishas feet that they've got on the all models. You're more of
I want the small little clip-clop ones. Yeah, the mild claws, not the big mad ones that they've now got. Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. They're just spreading loose. I think that's what it is. They lack the disciplines of the traditions of old, where they were more kind of, they had that more kind of ballerina-esque poise, and they were a bit more, well disciplined. This is a new, space horse with, a greater degree of disregard for the traditions of old, I'd say.
Clearly, that's the case.
Absolutely, absolutely. You'd never see these horses perform a, at least compelling rendition of Swan Lake.
I mean, that could be interesting, though.
Exactly. Although I imagine it would be technically sound, but it would lack the heart, right? Like Data from Star Trek back in the day when he played the violin.
Yeah.
All right, fine. Anyway, so Imperial Guard are coming down the pipe. I hear from people who say things, rumours and what have you, that they're going to be a very good book. That's what I hear. They're already quite strong. Apparently, they're going to continue to be strong, but not in a nasty sort of way, just in a very good sort of way.
Well, that could be good. Well, it sounds like they're doing quite well at the moment with the current stuff, so a codex should make them slightly better, but hopefully not worse. And some of the rules that they've previewed so far seem quite interesting. I think one of the weirdest changes, or biggest changes, is that the infantry squads and generic command squads have disappeared, and that you're now sort of forced to choose either a Krieg version, a Cadian version, or a Katachan version. And if you don't have one of those, you just still have to pick one, the one that suits you the most.
There you go.
Which is
fill in
interesting.
The blanks.
Exactly, interesting flexibility options that you could pick and choose. It does seem a bit weird, but I'm willing to reserve judgment until the whole codex is out and we have a proper look through it.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I think Guard codexes represent a really interesting part of a 40k edition. I think Guard have always been an army that has kind of represented the more kind of honest version of the game over the years. They've not necessarily ever been super accelerant in terms of their power ability. They've never been like the strongest thing on a sort of one-to-one basis, but it's their overall kind of composition that makes them really interesting. And I think it really gives the rules writers an opportunity to kind of showcase some of the more interesting aspects of the design philosophies that kind of run through their design decisions. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that's represented. I think at the moment where Guard is really interesting in the current kind of lay of the land is that they seem to have access to obviously quite a lot of very useful cheap bodies which can be used for accomplishing actions, and then obviously combo that with some quite small profile heavy damage, high health units in the form of their kind of tanks and what have you. So I think there's that interesting thing where, because their tank range, although obviously the Rogel Dawn is, a slightly bigger footprint than the old Lehman Russes, those kind of vehicles seem to really add quite a lot of viability just because of their relative size, combined with obviously the hordes of other troops, which seems to really work well in this edition. It definitely feels more and more that you need that kind of disposability for trading purposes, but then you also need that kind of power. And I think Guard just sort of have that synergy really well unlocked, which is no shock why they've been doing well thus far and seemingly will hopefully continue to do so, because I like it when Guard are on top. It feels like a good addition when Guard are good,
I mean, Guard have historically never been good except in 9th edition, so honestly I don't know how that statement can hold up, Dan, to any kind of scrutiny.
They were very interesting and capable of good things in 8th edition. Yes, okay, fair enough. They weren't one of the consistent high meta, but they had interesting flavour and they had lots of opportunities to do fun things.
True. I was just talking more, in terms of doing well in the meta.
When I say good, I mean, sort of middle. I don't mean the ridiculous. Good. Yeah. Like good. Not great good or unbelievably good. Because that's the thing, it's the other codex that's coming out soon, the Elder, that enjoy that level of praise. Like, that's always the way the game goes. It's like Guard have to be somewhere in the middle, and for no reason at all, Elder need to be right at the top, because that is where they belong, Phil. They are the kings of the game, as well.
Well, it'll be interesting if that ends up being the case, for sure.
I mean, again, all the rumours suggest that it will be. Again, I don't really know. I really don't pay super large amounts of attention to rumours just because, they're rumours, right? And, they're fun to talk about, but ultimately I tend to just kind of wait to see what, Games Workshop have to say. But it seems evident, based on just the release of this Elder Codex, that there's going to be some efforts to obviously amplify Aspect Warriors, or at least there should be, given the fact that there's such a heavy emphasis on Aspect Warriors with this particular release. The thing that I'm most interested in both the Guard Codex and the Elder Codex, and I don't know when people will start knowing this for sure, but the stuff that's not in those books is going to be the thing that I find super interesting. In the case of the Elder, it feels like most of it will stick around, but there are a couple of random examples that could go. And obviously in Guard, it's sort of a similar kind of vibe in so much as what could be moving on. But a lot of those hits kind of happened in the 9th edition book and subsequent index anyway. So obviously Commissar Yarrick was removed. But yeah, do you foresee, Phil, any of the other characters going? Did you still have access to Iron Arm, Strachan, or Sly Marbo, etc.? And are they likely to?
Yeah, I think those two are still available, and I guess it's a matter of, are they still available on the web store? Because that would really dictate whether they're available.
Marbo got a plastic release though, right? Albeit a limited run, but he did have a plastic.
Oh, no, he did, didn't he? Yeah. But you couldn't actually get hold of him on a general release, whereas the others tended to be mostly metal, whereas I think Yarrick's downfall was that he was Finecast, and they were just ditching Finecast. So, weirdly, if he had stuck with his slightly older metal version, he would have should have been fine.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see if that's where it goes, though, if Iron Arm, Strachan, and who was the heavy bolter geezer? I've just forgotten his name now.
Harkin.
Harkin, that was it. Yeah. See if Harkin. If Harkin's still in it now, fair enough. He might be gone already, but that's going to be interesting. In the case of the Elder, we have 3 potential victims. The first, I'd be amazed if this happens, but I wouldn't be surprised, which is Karandras, obviously the only absent Phoenix Lord from the range refresh. Karandras, the Shadow Hunter, did not receive a new plastic sculpt. Does that mean that that particular character is no longer in the Codex? We'll wait and see. The other one, which I think is a dead cert, I think Illic Nightspear, the Eltok Ranger character, I really doubt that guy is going to make it into this book. I mean, most people probably have no idea who I'm even talking about. Exactly. There you go. So there was basically, I think it was either the 6th, yes, it was the 6th edition Elder book release, alongside Wraith Knights and all of that good stuff. They gave us a fine cast sculpt of a Ranger character, a Pathfinder character called Illic Nightspear. And he used to have a sniper rifle that had a strength D shot. Do you remember that film?
No.
No memory whatsoever. Anyway, he was great, but I imagine he's going away.
It does sound like the sort of Elder nonsense I would expect, so I'm not surprised.
It did. It was hilarious. I definitely used him against you back in the day, Phil. I swear to God.
Sounds about right.
Like in the old games of 7th edition, where you being like, look, I've got a Baneblade. And I go, but I have a sniper rifle with strength D. Plop!
Yeah.
And then, the last one, I think, who's probably... to me, I feel like he's a really, really good candidate for a new... In fact, all 3 of these could have been good candidates for new sculpts, but Prince Uriel, I just don't see Prince Uriel making it. He's moved to Finecast. I don't think Uriel's going to cut the mustard. If it is that Uriel gets a day in the sun, it'll probably be down the road with a Corsairs release or something. But I think Uriel Illic probably very likely to go, and I'll be intrigued if Karandras goes, or Karandras, however you want to pronounce it, because that's going to be a really interesting thing, because there is a lot of love for that character amongst Elder players. So yeah, I'm going to be intrigued to see how people interpret that if that happens. But we'll wait and see, right? I mean, who knows? It's one of the interesting aspects of 10th edition is every single 10th edition release seems just underpinned by a sense of loss because something always gets removed. So maybe that's what we'll see this time around. Who knows, eh, Phil?
Yeah, and to be fair, I sort of feel like that will also be a trend carrying on into 11th edition as well, whether that's, vehicles finally being replaced with new ones, things like Rhinos and Land Raiders going, who knows what they do in the future, because there's still that aspect, like vehicles and flyers are the one sort of holdover of old models that feel like they probably will replace them at some point. Like even things like the Lehman Russ, like the Sentinel got changed and that got updated, even though it didn't really feel like it needed it so much. But then when you look at the new one, you can see that there's a very big change. And yeah, I sort of wonder if the Rogel Dawn is the Lehman Russ replacement, because if you look at a lot of some of the new artwork, the Rogel Dawn is front and center and the Lehman Russ is sort of hiding in the background, basically. So it does make me wonder if the Lehman Russ will just be replaced with this much bigger vehicle, or if they update it in some way in the new style.
I think an update would be necessary. I think it'd be a tragedy to remove the Lehman Russ from mainline circulation.
I completely agree. But then it would it be odd to have a competing Lehman Russ from the Horus Heresy game, which is ultimately a near identical sculpt with some tweaks, unless they completely revise its design look to fit in with the more curved edges of the Sentinel and the Rogel Dawn, which would be the only way to sort of make it look more like them, and then much different from the now Heresy version of the Lehman Russ.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to imagine how that might happen, but I think, like the Lehman Russ is just such an iconic kit. I think they just probably keep it the way it is, because I think in the minute you start, adding a bunch of curved edges to it, you start making it look like one of those Beetles, the old car. It'd just be like ridiculous. Like it's not a Lehman Russ.
Personally, I wouldn't want it to be changed, and I think the Forge World one is, or the Heresy one's the better.
Oh, they're
version
fantastic.
Of the two. Yeah.
I mean, Heresy on the whole is just fabulous, and I think they just do great stuff with it in terms of sculpts and other things. I mean, nowhere else was that more prolific than with the reveal of why have I just forgotten his name now? The Primarch of the Emperor's Children, Phil. Jesus, where's my brain gone? Fulgrim. Lord, oh Lord. I was going to say, and it doesn't matter, I was going to say Lucius, basically. And I was like, no, it's not Lucius.
Well, Lucius's silhouette, I believe, has been revealed for the LVO.
Which looks very cool. Very cool. That's a fine-looking silhouette. But yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because obviously we got the Heresy version of Fulgrim, and it is a stunning miniature. And it appears an unparalleled sort of miniature, because effectively the 40k version of it, although I accept will be a much more robust kit because of its plastic construction and its sort of chunkier design features, although ever so slightly chunky. I'm not suggesting that it's particularly chunky. I think they did a very good job in plastic of kind of realising it and adding those features and kind of conveying all of the kind of serpenty elements and demonic aspects of the character. But it is that thing now where you have to ask yourself, it's like, what? Obviously there's going to be a price differential as well, although probably not a dramatic one. It is that thing where it's like, I do feel like the Horus Heresy game kind of almost sort of yucked the main Warhammer 40,000's yum by putting out such a beautiful sculpt of Fulgrim for them to kind of follow and not do badly with by any stretch of the imagination. I think if the Forge World / Heresy version of Fulgrim didn't exist, this would be phenomenal. But with that in existence, it just sort of feels like a sort of weird sort of like Funhouse Mirror version of it almost.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think a lot of people probably felt similar when Guilliman came out. And that's the only time we really had a direct comparison with a Heresy and a 40k Primarch model, because none of the others have had their sort of demon form in Heresy done.
Well, we obviously had it with Lionel Johnson as well. The Lionel Johnson sculpt for Heresy is really cool, like really cool, and it's cool in a different way to the 40k one. I think in both the case of Gilliman and Lionel Johnson, their Heresy sculpts are so dramatically different from what their 40k sculpts were that you couldn't really. It was more about, like, it wasn't so much about the technical prowess and ability of the sculptors or even just the kind of techniques of bringing those kind of concepts to life. It was that they were just totally alien things, you know, like Gilliman in Heresy is a very kind of Roman kind of emperor type character with very kind of traditional heroic bearing and more of a kind of position of authority is also, and more of a ceremonial pose, whereas his 40k counterpart is very, you know, battle hardened and in much more of a kind of combative pose, and ultimately is adorned in all of this unbelievably baroque and insane kind of very kind of grim dark 40k armor. So the two minis are dramatically different from each other. Same thing with Lionel Johnson, where the Heresy version is this sort of very kind of action-based pose where obviously if you get the full kind of diorama set, he's laying waste to Night Lords and causing all sorts of havoc as he's kind of carving through them. Whereas the 40k one, you know, obviously most notably, he's a much older man now and also is more kind of striding into battle as opposed to kind of being in the midst of it. And I think that's the thing, like, you know, Lionel Johnson's 40k miniature is phenomenal, but so too is his Heresy one. For me, weirdly, both Gilliman sculpts are not dramatically incredible to me. Like, I think they both have weird flaws to them that I'm not super fond of, but I think controversially, I feel like the 40k version of Gilliman I've just got more of an affinity with that sculpt than I do the Heresy one. The Heresy one, I always sort of look at his dirty face and sort of think, ugh, not for me.
I think the Heresy one's probably one of the weaker Heresy sculpts, but I still think it stands up quite well. I think the 40k one is probably a bit of a radical departure in its design aesthetic from like its armor, and I think that's the thing that probably people find a bit more disappointing with it, because it's very baroque and a bit over the top. The pose and stuff I don't mind too much. I remember people not liking the face all that much, whereas I feel like Lionel Johnson, sorry, is consistently visually quite similar. Yes, you see his face and he's a lot older in the 40k one, but he's still got similar kind of armor. Albeit, you know, stuff has changed over the years. But the journey of that model feels quite similar to each other as opposed to a radical departure. Whereas Fulgrim's obviously is similar, but has also, there are some distinct differences as well. And some of it is probably quite good, like the wings being smaller and more like encased around the model, so it feels like a lot more easier to transport as a practical gaming piece, whereas I think the Forge World one is probably a bit of a nightmare and is much better suited to like a display piece. But obviously it doesn't have the intricate detail. I think my two criticisms of it were the 40k piece it's like the snake body is like a leathery sausage. There's no scales or detail in it. It's all quite flat and wrinkly, and similar for the wings as well. And I think actually those will be a lot harder to paint when you're given a much smoother surface, whereas the Heresy version, like, you can see sort of snake scales on the body, and it's like, cool, whack some contrast on that or dry brush it and it would be relatively easy to paint, whereas you can't pull that off quite in the same way as in the 40k version. And I think that kind of lack of detail, I'm assuming, might be just a limitation of the plastic and the number of sprues that they could do, so it's not built into a million pieces. But because of it, you sort of lack, you know, its quintessential snakeness in that model.
Yeah, it's just something about it that, I just think, again, I think without the Heresy Mini, that thing, it will be stunning and incredible and impressive. With the Heresy Mini, it still is those things, but it's just lesser. And I think that's the problem with it. And again, it's heavily rumoured and kind of been outright stated by kind of Games Workshop insiders that the frictions and the weirdnesses between Citadel, the kind of mainline Warhammer producers, and the specialist design team, or formerly Forge World, has always been kind of oddly pronounced, and the two have never quite consistently got along, which sounds mad, but then any of us who've worked in any kind of corporate infrastructure can probably identify the weirdnesses of kind of, inter-team kind of competitiveness that sort of happens. But regardless of that, yeah, it's a very odd thing because, like, in a way, knowing, and I assert that, the specialist design team probably had an inclination that, eventually they were going to do a Fulgrim model for 40k, but they probably didn't know for sure, so they probably just went ahead and did it. And, after they probably invested what they did and did it, then they just had to sort of put it out there. And then, I can imagine Jez and the design team in Citadel / Games Workshop probably spitting a few feathers over that. I mean, me and Phil once had the privilege of going to Tottenham Court Road, which wasn't in itself a privilege, but we went to the store in Tottenham Court Road for store anniversary, and the big draw, the selling point that Jez was there, and you could buy his Elder sketchbook, and he would sign it. And we ended up having a chat with him, and basically he just moaned, didn't he, Phil, the whole time about how Forge World took away the opportunity for him to do Mechanicus first, which I thought was hilarious.
Because he had a sketchbook full of a load of his designs, which you can see a lot of, I think, in some of the other books that have been published over the years. But yeah, I think he had the Castellan robots were in there, and a couple of the other things that he did, but obviously they are so wildly different from the Heresy Mechanicum model range.
Yeah.
They don't really sort of fit together in a cohesive way, unlike sort of how, you can see the development from Space Marines. And I feel like the Forge World Heresy team have done a good job of retroactively creating some of the stuff, like one of the Mechanicum models clearly has a nod to, like, the Plague Drone, for example, from 40k. They've done a good job of doing this sort of backwards design process for a lot of their stuff. But yeah, with the Mechanicum, because they did their stuff first, it doesn't really work in quite the same way. That was interesting. Yeah, so there's always been those kind of, I guess, internal struggles about who gets to design what and stuff. And I guess, from a, selfish point of view for the Heresy team, I imagine they're not, I don't know if they would be annoyed, but obviously a lot of people are going to buy the plastic Fulgrim because it's cheaper and run it in Heresy. But then, and that's taking sales away from them, right? But from the model that they've only recently, it's probably 2 years old now?
Yeah, probably not even that. No, I think it was a year and a half. I think it was like October, November of 23, I want to say. So yeah, about a year and a half ago. But yeah, man, like, look, I think at the end of the day, if people are going to take the 40k Fulgrim model and use it in their Heresy games, fair play to them. But at the same time, I think a lot of the Heresy players would probably prefer to use the Heresy version of the mini.
Oh, I think so. There'd be a lot of purists around as well. And in a way, you could argue that actually, if anyone, it's probably just harming the recasters, because people that can't afford the original Heresy one, rather than going to a recaster, might just buy the plastic one now, because that's half the price, I'd assume.
Maybe. Although I think they'd surprise you. I think they'll surprise you, Phil. I think Fulgrim will probably still be north of 120 quid. I
mean, I guess he's sort of night priced. I mean, how much is Mortarion?
Mortarion, I think Mortarion was...
Because he feels like he should be about 70, 80 quid to me.
Yeah, hang on. Just having a quick little nose on Fulgrim. Where are it?
Because I imagine Fulgrim's like... How much?
182 for Fulgrim.
Oh, I thought he'd be at least 200. So,
Well, I mean, he kind of already is, yeah. And then, he's only...
He's not far off.
Yeah, he's not far off. So many potential options for MOR. Mortar. No. Where is he? Oh, here we go. Oh, I can't find him. Oh, here we go. Mortarion. Where are you, Mortarion? He's £102 and 50 pence, Phil.
It's expensive.
Very expensive.
I mean, I guess he's a knight price, which is, I guess that's reasonable, but he feels like he should. Yeah, he feels more expensive than he should be.
Well, I think that's just Games Workshop product across the board.
That's how much he was when he first came out, and he's just gone up in price since then, maybe.
As is the way. As is the way. And then, 40k wise, beyond that, obviously, in terms of recent news around the game and other bits and pieces, basically there's a Knight Codex coming out, hopefully, before the end of the quarter. So by the time we get to like February, March time, end of February, early March time, we'll have new Imperial Knights, which should be really cool. Knights are consistently doing okay for themselves. They're a really cool, popular army because they're quite easy to get into. Obviously expensive, but quite low model count, quite appealing. So really hopeful that they get some love and get really turned into something super interesting. They didn't do too well in terms of the Grotmus detachment, although it was thematically interesting, but it wasn't really as good as what they had before. So I do understand why people were a bit underwhelmed by that. So yeah, like Knights are around the corner. Is there anything you particularly want to see for Knights, Phil? Are you excited about any particular individual aspect of that?
No. I like Knights. I've always had desire to own them. Well, I do own them. I just haven't ever built them. So yeah, I'm always curious to see what they get. I'll happily, if they get new models, that's great, but they kind of don't really need it unless you want more like-for-like comparisons with the Chaos ones, because they've got more little guy variants, like the Armiger Helverin equivalents. Like they could do some of those. I mean, a Psy Knight like you've got with the Psy Titans, something like that would be really interesting, but not needed.
Not really needed.
And that sort of thing could be just kept for Chaos.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice sort of distinction between like the Chaosy ones and the Imperium ones. Like the Imperium ones are all the sort of nobility; they're these warrior kings, as it were. Whereas, the Chaos are the Chaos, and they're demonic and psychic and use all the wibbly stuff. And I think that works fine for me. That's good. Like have a division between the two of them. I like all the chivalry stuff, basically. Like I like all that. Chivalric, thank you.
I like the pilot mini that they did for the named character Knight. I'd love just a set of little Knight characters that I could personalise, and when my model blows up on A4 up, the little guy can come out and run around. I don't know.
You want your Transformers headmasters.
Yeah. Well, it's a patch ejection unit.
Yeah. You want it more like those old kind of robot toys from the 80s, where it's like
where it pops off. And
jumps out. Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. For me, I agree with you. The thing that was weird to me was when they did the Imperial Agents book, that they didn't have a Mechanicus contingency in that, or Mechanicus contingency in that book in the same way as they did with the Sisters and the Grey Knights and the Death Watch. Because it feels like, obviously, this detachment that they got from Grotmas does sort of satisfy some of that desire from players to have, a Mechanicus cohort alongside their Knights. But it felt like really odd that they didn't give that as a kind of Imperial Agents option, specifically for Knight players looking to, have that sort of synergy.
I think people have always wanted the idea of little guys running around as guards for the actual Knights themselves, and I think even one of the Forge World Skitarii upgrade kits was basically the little guys for the Warlord Titans, or the Titans in general. So a sort of Mechanicum or, chivalric feudal guard unit, depending on which allegiance your Knight household belongs to, would be a cool and interesting addition. It does feel like it's, I don't want to say cheating or cheesing. It's sort of filling the niche gap that the army sort of desperately wants filled. But then that should be the downside of playing that army. and actually filling that hole is just allowing them to do everything really well. Whereas having a really strong, big units, but it's a low model count and you don't have cheap bodies, to me is a really good trade-off and interesting thematic difference in their army versus, Guard that have plentiful access to cheap bodies. So yes, I can sort of see the two elements to it. Yes, it would be great to have, but also I think, from a mechanic games point of view, I think it's actually quite good that they don't have it.
No, I do agree. I think it's important that they try and keep some level of archetype alive in terms of different armies with different advantages. I think it's important. So I do agree with you that that's the way forwards.